This morning, the title of the sermon is Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones. And we're going to be looking at the sixth chapter of Zechariah in our sermon time. And I wanted to lay a groundwork for this because I believe that we need, as Craig mentioned, to rethink all that we have been taught from the time of our infancy in our homes, into our education, in our families. We need to rethink this. We do not need to be beholden to the past when it is in contradiction to what God has designed for the future. And you and I need to be forward thinking. We need to be looking towards something. And I think one of the mistakes that one of the road or miscalculations in the church has been the emphasis on getting into heaven. Somehow we are going to be saved from not only God's wrath, but from all the benefits that it engenders. And that is not totally inappropriate, obviously, but it is also somewhat misguided in the fact that we have not been taught that there's something related to this eternal state, this time to come, this what we should be putting our emphasis on. And so briefly, if you would look at Isaiah with me, and we will look at something that the book of Revelation mentions in the 65th chapter, starting in the 17th verse. And again, I've titled this the Game of Thrones because this is about the acquisition of ultimate power. This is related to a geopolitical system that will eventually manifest itself under the lordship of Jesus Christ. In the meantime, we are in the battleground, and there is a battle over thrones. There is a battle with powers and demons that are working out, attempting to create their own kingdom. Satan is attempting to create his own kingdom. He has taken a third of the angelic beings with him to create this, and it is his intention through his Antichrist, his Messiah, to establish a kingdom. And he has been using time on earth as the little king of this earth, the little God of this earth, to manifest that. And history is replete with this activity. The idea of power is something that men, Henry Kissinger called it an aphrodisiac. Tacitus, the great Roman historian, speaking about the motive of Augustus Caesar, the motive was the lust for power. Augustine said that the city in the book City of God, the lust of power in arrogant hearts destroyed the Roman Empire. And likewise, Edward Gibbon, in his book The Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire, says of all the passions and appetites, the love of power is of the most arrogant and unsociable, since the pride of man requires the submission of multitudes. I believe that we have seen a manifestation of power in the last 2 to 3 years like we have not seen maybe in the history of our country. Not maybe in the history of mankind. There has not been a coordinated manifestation of the exercise of power like we have seen, and it is related to the fact that we have been deceived. And it was successful. And it has changed the destiny of nations. It has restructured the orientation of people, and in many ways has physically harmed them. Not only for what it claimed to protect us from, for what it gave us as a cure. And this is all driven by the lust for power. History is replete with it. The acquisition of it, the exercise of it, the intrigue over it, the pursuit of it, the battle over it, the abuse of it, the loss of it, the love of it. I think we're in the Ukraine right now because of the lust for power. I think we went into Afghanistan and Iraq out of the lust of power. It could be argued that World War I and World War II were nothing but a manifestation of a global exercise of the lust of power, the desire to be on top. And this manifestation is something that has been with us from the very beginning. It could be said that that's the reason that Satan came into the garden, out of a lust for power, tyranny. In his book, The Lust of Power, George H. Smith writes, "It is the selfish lust of domination, men and women, women and men. It is the lust of domination, not the rational motive of self-love, that will transform the most mild government into most insupportable tyranny. The lust of domination will cause a government to become tyrannical." I was telling Craig this past few 7 weeks, I'm acutely aware of what is going on in Richmond at our House of Delegates, is the fact that I have a niece that was a page down there. And I had mixed reservations about her going there, but one of the things that I found out is that several bills, and there were multiple bills that were presented, fortunately not passed, but one of the bills was a simple bill to prevent young people from checking out explicitly pornographic material from our public libraries and our school libraries without the consent of the parent. A juvenile is not able to go and buy pornography. They're not even able to go and buy alcohol. They should not be able to go to a public library and acquire a book that is explicitly pornographic, and the major concern was not only pornographic, but relating to pedophilia. And as a demonstration of the lust of power, one party in unison voted against such a bill. The lust of power will cause the people to do things unimaginable, and I believe we are in the throes of an unimaginable time where people, out of the desire for power, will do unimaginable things. A man, according to George Smith, a man motivated by the destructive passion will need the assistance of like-minded people. Some of our brothers and sisters need to be challenged on how they vote. Not because we advocate any particular political ideology, but because we stand for the kingdom of God and for righteousness. And it is inconsistent with the teachings of God and some of the decisions that are being made in Washington and in Richmond and in our local municipalities. Tyrannical ideas require like-minded subordinate instruments in the pursuit of power. The tyrant must wear the mask of concealment of his own motives. He must live a perpetual lie. He will court the friendship of every man who is capable of promoting and endeavor to crush every man who is capable of defeating his ambitions. Thus his friendships and his enemies will be alike, unreal, easily convertible, and if the change will serve his interest. In other words, none of his relationships, whether they be friendly or whether they be antagonistic, will be genuine. Only his relationships will exist. And we have come accustomed to the glad-handing preacher, the glad-handing politician or the glad-handing salesman. He sells you something and befriends you, whether he's preacher or politician or salesman, not because he genuinely wants to assist you, but because he is looking out for his own interests. Such is the depravity of mankind. This is coming from an atheist in the writings of George Smith. Samuel Adams, speaking of the Boston town meeting in the beginning of the nation, declared that ambition and the lust of power above the law are predominant passions in the breast of most men. Let me say that again. For the thief, for the liar, for the cheat, for the person who finds himself in jail and then says that the system is unjust because he is there. It is not there because of an unjust system. It is because he is there. A thief steals for power. A liar lies for power. A murderer takes life for power. And Sam Adams said that ambition and the lust of power above the law. People don't like to get pulled over because they think themselves above the law. And their lust of power above the law are predominant passions in the breast of most men. Tertullian argued that all secular power and dignities are not merely alien, but hostile to God. Let me say that again. I know God establishes all governments, and Jesus said, give unto Caesar what is Caesar. But I agree with Tertullian, the great Christian apologist who lived shortly after the disciples, that all secular government is hostile to God. Nebuchadnezzar, Babylonian nation, the Medes and the Persians, the Greeks, the Romans, all secular power is hostile to God. Secular governments owe their existence to the sword. How did we get where we are? Is because government exercises power by the sword. You must do this because we say so, or you will suffer the consequences of either incarceration, abuse, suit, or other exercises of power to force you against your will, which took place over the last 3 years when people were forced to take something against their will to keep their jobs or to keep from the government interfering in their lives. Churches today still do not meet because they have become infected by the venom of power that exists in the halls of our government. And as a preacher of the gospel of Jesus, who we are going to talk about, another kingdom. You see, we do not live for this kingdom. We are living for another kingdom. And Jesus said this kingdom is what?
Not of this earth.
His kingdom is not of this earth. His kingdom is from somewhere else. So Tertullian argues that all secular power and dignities are not merely alien but hostile to God. Secular governments owe their existence to the sword. All institutions of the government, Roman government, even its charities, were based on brute force. We call them today NGOs, non-governmental organizations, utilized and in cooperation with the government to exercise power. This is contrary to the way of Christians, among whom everything is voluntary. Rather, they rely on coercive taxation. Christians contribute voluntarily and do not hesitate to share that which God has given them. George H. Smith wrote that power is naturally active, vigilant, and distrustful, which qualities in it push it upon all means and expedite itself upon destroying all oppositions and even the seeds of opposition. It would do what it pleases and has no check. Now, let me tell you something. When you have a checkbook that you can create money out of nothing, you can do as you please. You can send money to overseas. You can create money. You can substantiate your will because you have the power to create money out of nothing. It extinguishes liberty. It requires conformity. And so therefore we have no longer a nation made of stones, but we are a nation made of bricks. No longer are we a church who stands on the rock, but we are a people who stand in the air. It's generally numerous guards, many creatures, and it protects its treasure. It is not honest, and it is not innocent. Lord Acton said that the struggle for the concentration of power and for the limitation and division of power is the story of history. Karl Marx would agree, class struggle between the bourgeois and the proletariat, that is the seed between why we have division among the races in the United States of America. It is not because there is injustice, not because it is because it has been planted into the minds of men and women who have been indoctrinated unknowingly under the doctrines of Karl Marx, who said that history is a struggle between the bourgeois, those who are in, and those who are out. The Constitution of the Republic of China stipulates that the proletariat, the people who are out, must exercise all-around dictatorship over the bourgeois in the superstructure, including the sphere of culture. Hollywood does not represent the average American. Hollywood represents power in the exercise they are of. They are the subordinates of those in power. Wall Street does not exist for the exercise of liberty so that people can trade and goods and services freely. It is the instrument of power. And ultimately, Washington, D.C. exists not as a place where men and women who live freely come together to negotiate their lives in this land. It is an instrument of power. Karl Marx said in the Communist Manifesto that of all hereto existing human society is the history of class struggle. Lenin said, what is to be done? He called for a party of professional revolutionaries. We had this recently, didn't we, when we had the so-called riots in the United States of America, and factions came together just like Lenin would have used in Moscow, or Mao would have used in China, or would have happened in Castro's Cuba, happened in the United States of America, where a party of professional revolutionaries, taught and disciplined and directed, capable, listen to this, this comes from Lenin. Doesn't come from CNN or Fox or some other website that you follow or some kind of ideology that has infiltrated your mind. Lenin says that the party of professional revolutionaries, disciplined and directly, their job is to defeat the police. Where do you think you get this idea that the police are the enemies? Because of experience or because of indoctrination? I would suggest it is the latter and not the former. It comes from the establishment of the dictatorship of the proletariat to subject the proletariat to our influence. The proletariat is being used by Lenin in power to influence and direct and use it for his best interest. Marx, Lenin, Stalin, and Mao said that a permanent war should be replaced by permanent revolution. We have a revolution going on in the United States of America and throughout the world. Mao and his talked about cultural revolution, continuous revolution. He believed that revolution suggested that that revolution, like we had in 1776, cannot be really just one time. This is a continual, he said this is a contradiction, and it will continue to develop, thus a need for perpetual, unresolved, continuing cultural and continuous revolution. In other words, Mao taught that we are in a cycle of revolution continuously, ever going to establish and transform the very nature of society and transform this, listen to me, the ultimate goal of the Maoist, the Stalinist, the Leninist, is to change the very nature of humankind, to bring in a new man who will not think of himself, but he will think of the group. And of course, what Mao and Lenin and Stalin and Marx don't tell you is the group lives for them. Now, Isaiah in this section of chapter 65, verse 17, Isaiah 65, verse 17. Again, this is just an introduction to the sermon that's coming, but I want to give you a vision of what God says about power and politics and the future to come. God says in Isaiah 65, 17, behold, I will create new heavens and a new earth. The former things will not be remembered, nor will they come to mind. Be wary of those who want to draw you back into old arguments and old issues, because in the new heaven it will never be remembered. God says, my sins are as east as of the west. He does not remember them anymore. But be glad and rejoice forever in what I will create. For I will create Jerusalem to be a delight, and its people a joy. I will rejoice over Jerusalem and take delight in my people. The sound of weeping and of crying will be heard in it no more. See, this is the kingdom that they're trying to replicate under the auspices of the Antichrist, led by Satan. They are attempting to replicate what Isaiah is describing here as the ultimate goal of God's purpose for history. They do have it right. The ultimate goal of history is about a kingdom. Never again will there be in it, this kingdom, an infant who lives but a few days, or an old man who does not live out his years. He who dies at 100 will be thought as a mere youth. He who fails to reach 100 will be considered accursed. They will build, listen to this, they will build houses and they will dwell in them. They will not build apartments and dwell in somebody else's house. They will plant vineyards and eat their fruit. They will not be dependent on the supply chain anymore. No longer will they build houses and others will live in them, or plant and others eat. For as the days of a tree, so will be the days of my people. My chosen ones will long enjoy the works of their hands. They will not toil in vain, or bear children doomed to misfortune. No longer will it be a flip of a coin if this one will turn out okay or not. For they will be a people blessed by the Lord, they and their descendants with them. Before they call, I will answer, he says. While they are still speaking, I will hear. The wolf and the lamb will feed together, and the lion will eat straw like the ox. Interestingly, though, but the dust will be the serpent's food. They will neither harm nor destroy on all my holy mountain, says the Lord.